Hi there, folks. Sam here, and welcome to another recap of our ongoing Draw Steel campaign, Crows over Capital. We've had a couple more sessions, and I'm not going to promise you more full recordings because I don't think we're going to do them anymore. Changed our minds. Editing is a lot of work, and honestly, people by and large, in my limited experience, or in my sphere anyway, prefer a recap. So it's easier to do, it's more fun, it's more narrative than a whole session. You do miss out on the incredibly witty banter, but apart from that, I'm good enough. So, like I said, we have 2 more sessions. We have had another session visiting a character's family, but this one's closer tied into the main plot. So we have had a session with Sketch's family. So the heroes have travelled from their villa in the Dead City, and they travelled to the Stays, which people may know from the Chain of Acheron. And here in the Stays is where Pitch grew up. Not Pitch, Sketch. Sketch grew up. So she was a high elf, found as a baby in an alleyway. She's Batman in many ways. And she was raised by her adopted father, Alfie. And he was sort of adjacent to a thieves guild called the Pitch. So in these days, the Balanced Spring are the kind of big overall guild that kind of runs most things. But a lot of the neighbourhoods have smaller groups, and in the neighbourhood of Dipper Lane, it is the Pitch. So the Pitch are mostly goblins, with a few other people mixed in, and that's how Sketch grew up with this ongoing sort of life of thievery and crime. But at a certain point, she managed to get out of that life and became an apprentice with the Font, the Broadsheets Guild, and on the sort of engineering side, kind of making things, making the like work on the printing press, for example, and that sort of fed into her love of mechanisms, and her experience with alchemy and explosives didn't necessarily come too far into it, but they did a bit. Until she was called back for one last job, which is what we're now feeding back into. So the one last job is what put her on this path, got her killed, made her a revenant, and now her shadow is coming home to see her family. So several of the Pitch were with her that night, investigating or trying to steal the device, and she's come back, and the hero's gone to Stewart Street. I'll read you a little bit of I'll indulge myself in a little bit of description. Up close, the smell of the tanneries is even worse. The sound of washerfolk emptying tin baths and the accompanying sluice of dirty water adds to the impression that you're standing in one giant sewer. Dipper Lane is where all the unmentionables end up. Dried up tanners, dried out sailors. It is the Stay's refuge heap, and there will always be those who try and make a living in the garbage. Mantis's crew around Dipper Lane. If someone's robbed your old dad, chances are they either know who did it or they done it themselves. And the gold buttons won't care either way. So that was the vibe coming home for Sketch. And they enter it's a very foggy day, because our storm conduit, Azrael, gets to pick the weather after every respite, which has so far been really cool. And he picked fog. So it was a very foggy day, and they felt like there was a few like odd smells, but the whole place is stinking, so they didn't read too far into it. And they got into the house to find a body. The house is abandoned, and there's a body lying on the table. And the whole party was, oh, this is totally going to be Sketch's dad. Why is Sam doing this again? Why does our director have to always kill everyone's families? But it was not. It was Mantis, the lead of the Pitch. And then Alfie, Sketch's goblin father, appears and talks about how whatever job Mantis got the Pitch involved with has got them all killed. And the party know this is the job they've just done, going up against the Keys, and they've came here partially to find out who it was that hired the Pitch to do that, and try and follow that thread back to find out who was responsible. But when they've arrived, apart from Alfie, the Pitch have been driven off or killed. So there's a bit of kind of role playing. Alfie and Sketch a bit of heart to heart, and she convinced him to come back with them and stay at their villa at a different part of the city, because he wasn't really deep into the Pitch. He's more like sort of a follower, hanger on, and I kind of been thinking this for a while because one of the perks Sketch has gets her a artisan, and Alfie knows all about chemicals and explosions and all that good stuff. Bears no resemblance to a certain butler. But yeah, so they've sent him back to the house, and they were chatting for ages, and they were kind of talking around in circles about the plan, because they found out from Alfie that the Balance Spring, the kind of big overarching thieves guild, are the ones who came in and killed the pitch. So try to work out what to do. Alfie's able to tell them that the pitch have their headquarters in Suet Street, and that they could go there and talk to them. But they talked about a few different plans, and as the director, I was struggling because I knew that there's a whole gang of the Spring waiting outside because they've been watching the house to see if anyone Sketch shows up. But I was torn because I wanted to let them have a bunch of RP. I didn't necessarily want the Spring to just kick in the door, but it kind of was almost going that way. And then they decide to step outside, and then they get ambushed by the Spring. Really fun little encounter. I could probably get the map up actually if we shrink me down here. Whoop. And have we look around. So this is in Incarnate. So I put together this map, and this is the director's version. So this is the baiting house, which is where the pitch had their headquarters, and I had these hidden creatures hanging all around. So the Balance Spring are mechanical people. Let's change that, make it look a little bit better. There we go. Too much space on either side. But part me down here. So this was the baiting house, and the Balance Spring are mechanical clockwork men who work for a mysterious figure called Grandmother. So I didn't have mechanical clockwork men in the Monsters rules, the Monsters book. I had Raiden Wights, and I thought their flamboyance fitted the vibe. So that's what we've got here. I made a couple of little tweaks, mostly to their malice abilities. But we had a whole bunch of minions. In fact, everything here is a minion apart from the Racrobat, which conveniently for the acronym was called Racket. So it went really cool. I could probably install some footage here of how cool it went. But basically, all these guys flood in, and they are harrying the party, kicking, throwing them around, while there's like loads of arrows and daggers and things raining from above. But the long and short of it was the party wiped the floor with them. And that actually came to the end of our session. And the players were torn. So we knew we were going to have a couple of weeks where we weren't sure who we'd all have in the group as part of the party. So we decided that Rolf and Sketch would split off here and track down what they could of the Spring. And they're deciding whether they want to, go to Suet Street and kidnap someone or leave a message, or their goal is to get a sort of face-to-face with Grandmother and find out who hired her. Because that is the thread that Sketch knows, is that the pitch were doing a job for the Spring. And the Spring were hired by someone else. So they need to find out who the someone else is. And I guess why the Spring passed that job on to the pitch rather than doing it themselves. But that kind of brought the session to an end, and we moved on to the second. Yeah, so last session we went to the Fulcrum. So the Fulcrum are the Assayers Guild. They're kind of like they're in charge of trade, and they're kind of like bankers to an extent. That's how I kind of described it. So they have their headquarters in the the Basilica of St. Bonagratia. So St. Bonagratia is the saint of risk and gambling. So the players have to head on over there, and by virtue we actually lost a few more players, so we ended up just going there with Asriel and Opaline. So Asriel, again, as well as being a Storm Conduit, is a Fate Conduit, and he really wants to know why his god keeps sending him places and dropping him. He was going on the ship, and suddenly he was sailing into the harbour at Capital. He wants to find out why. So I wanted to put in a bit where he got to do a reading with one of the priests of St. Bonagratia, and they use playing cards as their sort of tarot deck, but rather than that's what they use, they invented this deck, and that's what's become used for games, because it was used by the priests of the Saint of Gambling, and that's where the sort of deck of playing cards comes from in Capital. So I had to make up a few suits, and I used the gods as like the face cards and things. But did a little reading for him, and I think one of the tricky things with prophecy in general, and also this kind of thing, is you can make it mechanical, and I thought about doing that. I could have given him, here's some fate points, spend them how you want. You can do it for rerolls and things like that, but that's not really what he's looking for. He's not looking for a mechanical benefit, he's looking to find out what he's supposed to be doing. And there's an element of that being up to his character to figure that out themselves, but I thought, well, what can I give him? So they set off for the church. They head through the docks, and I used a few of the descriptions actually from when the Shade of Acheron arrive and the stays, and I had a similar experience where the heroes were stopped by a Knight of the Rubric, who is a Knight of the Font, the Broadsheets Guild, and she starts asking them questions, and then a gold button comes up. That's one of the police officers in the stays. They have the Princess Seal, but they work for the Fulcrum, and comes up and chases her off. And I had this whole RP worked out where they would kind of like banter with each other. The players would overhear a few bits of information, but Opaline and Azrael in the driving seat this session, so they just bolted and left. So we get to the beautiful church, we get inside, and they meet Don Andres, who is the priest, or one of the priests. The whole floor of the basilica is full of like gambling tables and other smaller tables where priests are doing readings. And I had two prepared. I had an Azrael specific reading prepared, and I had a party specific reading prepared. And the Azrael specific one was kind of in response to his questions. So he draws a few different cards, but he draws exclusively cards from the one suit, the Suit of Fortunes. So I was mostly trying to point him towards the kind of obvious truth, which is there isn't a preordained path for his character. What he does is the right thing, and that's true because we're playing a game. But it's also kind of true of the idea behind it, where it's like destiny and fate are not the same thing. It's not that you're predetermined to do these things. It's that your fate is to do this, to be this thing. I think there's a distinction there. He's here because there's something he can do to help. And I think I discovered that going forward, one of the Azrael plot lines I think is going to be he needs to get an opportunity to bail and leave Capital, because just now he's stuck in Capital, but he needs to get a chance to go so that he can then has a chance to pick to stay and stay with his friends and continue uncovering the kind of things they're uncovering, because it's really hard for a time reader from the Timescape to give a shit about which guild is in control or which person becomes, or who's the prince of the city. So I think it was a good thing. But gave him a few different cards, and he got quite vague answers, but he seemed happy enough with it. And I think that's where the mechanical side would have felt a bit of a letdown. This wasn't quite a specific vision, but it did mean there was a bit more narrative there for him. Opaline ended up getting a reading as well, because I have to follow this, because I'll just let them make their own bet. As a director, if players make bets with each other, I don't need to worry about that. I don't need to know the stakes or hold either of them to it. That's between their characters. So they made a bet because Opaline doesn't believe in prophecy, and Azrael's whole shtick is the future. So he bet. I think he bet that her prophecy, if she got a reading, the prophecy would come true. And they're both wagering a magic item on this. So I read out a reading for Opaline as well. So she draws Lord Anso of Crowns, who is the chieftain of the gods. Each of the gods is represented twice in two different suits. So he's in, I think, Crowns and another one. And Lord Anso of Crowns is the nobility aspect of Lord Anso. They have a noble patron. It's kind of the past as well. They have worked for Lady Valletta. They are going to be interacting with powerful people. The second card was Lady Denisa of Fortunes. Lady Denisa is the god that Saint Barnagrash is a patron of, a saint of. She is the saint of, or she's the god of fate, fortune, destiny. But she, in particular, in this, her aspect is a goddess of luck. In the fortunes version of the suit. So that against a little bit vague, but it was talking about the wheel always turns. If you're riding at high just now, you're about to hit a low. If you're high, if you're low, things are going to get better. It's all a big cycle. But also a way of saying things are about to change. And lastly, it was Viscount Falco of the Scales. So Falco is the god of treachery, among other things. And Don Andreas starts by saying, "Oh, treachery, your fate's weaver in a dark plot, a knife in the back, poison in the tongue." And then his voice goes all Sybil Trelawney, and he says, "The city will break upon the back of those who hold it up." Which is a spoiler, and I know some of my players will watch this, so I'm not going to say what that means. But it's a bit more meaty in the sense of like a prediction. And they like that. Particularly, Asriel was like, "Oh, that's a juicy bit of something." And Don Andreas, I don't know why I said that. And they then got caught up in a whole other tangle of things, but they kind of forgot why they were there. So the point of going to the Borg Rasha, the main point of going, was because it's the headquarters of the Fulcrum, which is who they want to speak to from another thread they followed. So it gets confusing, but the central plot of the campaign is the heroes all met when some of them were trying to steal an item called the device, whereas some of them were trying to protect the item, and some of them were trying to use that item to conduct a ritual. They were all hired by different people to do this. The ritual they were trying to do would disrupt Lady Valletta's ritual on the Lilac Night. Now, obviously that ritual did go wrong, and the Lilac Night happened, loads of people died, were turned into revenants. It's unclear whether this ritual had any effect on that, or if something else went wrong. But the heroes are trying to unpick, why did this all come about? Because we've all came together, and because of the Lilac Night, and we've seen Lady Valletta know she doesn't actually know what's going on. So let's follow all these threads back and find out, why were we there? So Oplene's followed it back to who hired her, or who sent her there to perform the ritual, and that was Reginald Orfeo, who she discovered worked for House Alvaro. So you're going, okay, so whoever at House Alvaro wanted Oplene to be there, they're against Lady Valletta, or what she wants. Okay. But then they followed Rolf's thread back to the keys, so he was hired to protect the device, protect the ritual. And when they spoke to the keys, they found out that the leader had taken over the keys and then promptly vanished, had dealings with the Fulcrum. So the Fulcrum have hired the keys to try and mess with Lady Valletta. And it's really easy to see why the Fulcrum want that. The Fulcrum wanted Lady Valletta's ritual to fail, because if she got her husband back, the money would start flowing and the prince wouldn't need to bring the Fulcrum into the council. But then you've somehow got House Alvaro and the Fulcrum, who are very opposed to each other, on the same side. The plot thickens. And then the heroes decide to follow back to the Imperial University, the Ramsey Treatise, which was the book that's been used for the ritual to activate the device. And it was from Francesca's library. That's how she got into the story. So she took it back, get back to her family. They were trying to find out what they could about it, but they basically just found out it's an old book of Kemharan lore. And it's used to activate the device. Anti-magic. Nothing super pointing fingers at anyone. Other than who stole the book. Someone who wanted this to succeed. And the last thread was sketching the pitch. So the pitch were trying to steal the device on the orders of the Balanced Spring, who were working on behalf of someone. Or they don't know yet. I'd be really interested in the comments if you think this is too convoluted. It is a lot, but I think over the course of sessions it's easy to unpick. Like, my mistake was having two rituals. A ritual to disrupt the ritual. The word ritual is there too many times. But I think having, especially if it becomes clear once you start unpicking it, that there's one or two people to point at, I think having a little bit of complexity at the start can be quite good. But I often get told I make plots too complicated or too political, so I'm interested in what other people think. But anyway, this is them following up the Fulcrum lead. They want to get face to face with Lady Shiromi, who's the head of the Fulcrum, and say, why did you hire the keys? So after a bit of back and forth, they figured out that's what they wanted to do, and they see two staircases heading up from the basilica to the upper floors where the Fulcrum have their headquarters. So there's one stair that's been blocked by a golden gate, and one stair has two guards standing by it. So it's the Aurum stair and the Ferrum stair. And it took the heroes a bit of time to figure it out, but basically the Aurum stair is for special occasions and it's locked. They didn't try and break it down or like kind of lockpick it or anything. They kind of tried the door and then went for the stairs. And I had a few different like rolls ready for how you get past these guards, and there was a little encounter that if you failed, you get a chance to sneak past them. And Opaline walks straight up and says, "We have an appointment with Lady Shiromi," and rolls a tier 3 result. So straight through. So they lead the party up and they go onto the top floor, and it's all laid out like offices. I can probably bring that one up as well, actually. I'll do it in a wee second. But the offices of the Fulcrum, it's their headquarters. So there's, a little archive, there's desks with the sort of stock market, or wouldn't be the stock, it's like sort of, I guess, monitoring trade ships and working what to kind of support and whatnot. So we have this upper floor. So we have a statue of St. Bonagracia. We have the office of Lady Shiromi, or the kind of boardroom. We have the archive, and we have various offices designed to monitor certain activities going on to do with Capital's trade. So here, the heroes decide to speak to the that's been put around. So boardroom, archive, statue, and all the other rooms. So Opaline marches straight up to the secretary and says, "We're here for an appointment, which is now with Lady Shiromi." And the secretary looks her in the eye and goes, "No, you're not, because Lady Shiromi's not here." And that kind of messed with them a little bit, and we kind of got into a big sort of deeper conversation around. They got to debate basically around whether or not they can make an appointment. So the secretary's more than happy to make them an appointment, but she was maintaining why you need to give me a reason, and if you give me a crap reason, the Lady Shiromi's just going to say no. She did mention her supervisor, and someone asked, and I wish I'd leapt on that more, because insisting to speak to the supervisor would get you in to speak to someone else, and that's the person they're probably going to end up speaking to anyway. But as the kind of RP was going back and forth and not necessarily getting anywhere, and I'm not like a slave to immersion, but I hate to sort of just suddenly break or retcon and say, actually, this just happens. I prefer to like have things be internally consistent. But then I thought about it, I was like, I have an encounter sitting right here, ready to go at some point when they're on this floor. If I do it now, then the cool thing happens sooner. And again, players are going to watch this, so I'm not going to say exactly what will happen. But at that point, restless spirits start drifting in. So if you can see on the map, there's these stained glass windows. Well, you've got a spectre and some shades appear. You've got an umbral stalker. You've got a wraith, a ghost, and they all appear and start attacking the civilians. And one spoiler I will give, when some of these creatures kill civilians, those civilians get right back up again and join the fight as ghouls. And we had one quick round of combat, and then we stopped for the night because we're going to pick it up again later. But yeah, so about time to reflect, about time to improve what I think is going to happen next as well. But I think the fight's going to finish, and then they're going to get a chance to speak to someone who they wanted to in the first place. Maybe look through that archive and see if they can make the connections they're hoping to make. It's been a shorter couple of sessions. We've kind of got halfway through 2 adventures. There is a back half to the first adventure with the Balanced Spring. I do have a whole encounter where you can go to their headquarters and have a fight and maybe a negotiation. But we're leaving that to Sketch and Rolf just now to come up with their plan, what they want to do. And that'll help me decide if I just want to, maybe there is a combat, or maybe there's some kind of montage they can do, or maybe I can just give them the negotiation straight away. I am adaptable. I like to write out whole adventures and then adapt to what the players do. And the same with this. Like the back half of this will lead on to other stuff. Similarly, I mean, players switch off now if you don't want to hear a little bit of spoilers. But essentially, the way I have the structure of the story is that either through the Fulcrum or through the Balanced Spring, you lead into. I think there's one ahead. So it basically goes the initial adventure, 4 possible things to explore, but all those come back into the 2 adventures. They come back into the adventure that the Spring lead to, and this adventure with the Fulcrum, and these both lead to the one big encounter. I say encounter, adventure, and then it spreads back out again to the next act of the story, and then back in again. But yeah, that was a recap of the next 2 sessions. We're going to play again this coming Thursday, and we will finish off our encounter with the Fulcrum, and then we'll see what the heroes want to do next. There's a lot of places they could go. We may end up in a fight with the Spring. We may end up at the wherever we go after the Spring, or wherever we go after the Fulcrum. But yeah, we're going to bring in a new player as well. Got a lot of schedule issues next little while. That is the bane of any RPG game, but I like to play as long as we've got a decent enough group, especially if it's not super plot critical stuff. I don't want people missing sessions. I less want them to miss story. So yeah, but we've got another player coming in, and they have a few ideas for a character, so we're going to get on the go soon. But they have to listen to all the recaps first, so that's why I had to make this one. But if you enjoy this, like, subscribe, hit the little bell, and follow along with the story. I suspect there's going to be a lot of it. Cheers.